Jacob's Well, a popular swimming hole near Wimberley, will remain closed to swimmers for the foreseeable future.
One of the most popular swimming spots in Central Texas remains closed for swimming. Jacob's Well has not been open for nearly a year.
There is a swimming hole in Texas that looks like paradise and behaves like a trap. Beneath the crowds and the postcard blue water, Jacob's Well drops into a cave so deadly that divers named its tunnels the birth canal. And it has swallowed people whole and refused to give them back.
And it's just a very tranquil time to basically decompress your body away from all the external things going on in the world, and it's just quite relaxing.
For decades, nobody could see what waited in its deepest, deadliest chamber. Then, a camera finally reached the bottom, and what came back answered a question that had haunted a Texas town for 21 years, while cracking open a darker one nobody has ever solved. How deep does this well really go? The beautiful lie. Let me take you to where this happens, because you have almost certainly seen a place like it and never known what it really was. Out in the rolling, sun-baked hill country of Texas, just outside a small town called Wimberley, a shallow creek named Cypress runs clear over limestone that was laid down almost 100 million years ago. And right in the middle of that creek bed, there is a hole, a dark, near-perfect circle, about 12 feet across, sitting in the middle of gentle, knee-deep water. On a hot afternoon, this place is packed. Families, college kids, tourists, all of them lined up along the limestone ledges, throwing themselves one after another into the water below. And the water is unreal. It holds at 68 degrees all year, fed from far underground by the Trinity Aquifer, one of the most important freshwater systems in the entire American Southwest. It is clear enough to look like liquid glass.
Water, one of those, probably one of the oldest industries there is in terms of providing drinking water that people can use.
It is one of the most photographed swimming holes in the state, and everybody who jumps in is smiling, but every single one of them is jumping into a lie. Because that pretty circle is not a swimming hole. It is the mouth of a massive, twisting, genuinely deadly underwater cave. Jacob's Well is not a well the way you are picturing a well. It is a karst spring, a shaft that drops straight down through the rock into the aquifer far below. It took millions of years to form, faintly acidic groundwater eating the limestone, away grain by grain, opening up rooms and tunnels that no human being designed and no human being controls. For a swimmer, the whole experience stops at the floor of the first room, a bright, sunlit chamber about 30 feet down. That is the fun part. That is the part on the postcards. But for a diver, that first room is not the destination. It is the front door. And past that front door, the well has earned a reputation that almost none of the people laughing on the surface have ever heard. A reputation built one body at a time. 4 silent rooms. Here is what is actually under your feet if you swim there. The cave runs close to a mile long and drops somewhere between 120 and 140 feet down, laid out like a staircase of flooded rooms, each one darker and tighter and more dangerous than the last. And the divers who mapped those rooms named the passages between them, the way you only name something you are afraid of. The squeeze between the second and third chambers gets so narrow that they call it the birth canal.
Je suis super content parce que tout le monde est content. Donc forcément j'attendais que ça, que tout le monde soit heureux.
You do not swim through it so much as force yourself through it. Deeper still, the third room hides a false opening, a dead end that looks exactly like the way out. Follow it, and it is the last decision you ever make. But the real killer down there is not the tightness, it is the silt. The floors of the deep rooms are not stone. They are covered in a fine, powdery layer of limestone dust that has settled over centuries. Soft as flour. One clumsy kick of a fin, and the water goes from perfectly clear to a solid, blinding cloud in about 2 seconds. Imagine that for a second. 100 feet under, in a room the size of a closet, and suddenly you cannot see your own hand pressed flat against your mask. And in that cloud, a diver loses everything at once. Can't read the gauges, can't find a buddy, can't tell which way is up anymore, can't find the guideline back to the surface if they even ran one. The panic comes fast, and a panicking diver burns air like a fire in a wind. At least 8 people have died in these rooms. Some of them were not found for years. A few were never found at all. The well keeps some things. And here is the part that keeps me up. This cave does not just punish mistakes, it punishes going deeper. The farther you push in, the more the loose gravel and silt shift and slide behind you, closing the way you came in with the exact same material you disturbed to get through. The people who died here mostly were not fools. Several were skilled and careful and prepared. They just reached the point where careful was not enough, where the room itself did the killing quietly, and then smoothed the gravel back over the top like nothing had happened. Before we go any further down into the dark, do me a favor and hit subscribe, because the two men I'm about to tell you about are the reason this whole place has the name it does, and their story does not go the way you think. Stay with me. September 9. It was just after midnight on September 9th, 1979, and you have to understand what cave diving was back then. It was the Wild West. No enforced safety standards, no required guidelines, nobody with the authority to stop a confident diver from deciding on a warm night that he was going into an underwater cave with a tank of air and his own nerve. It was a culture built on guts and ambition, and the specific electric thrill of going somewhere nobody had ever been. Kent Maupin was made for that world. 20 years old, an assistant dive instructor, and he had been diving since he was 12. 12. He was better at this than men twice his age, and Jacob's well had gotten into his head. His friend that night was Mark Brashear, also right around 20, younger to the sport, eager, and clearly a little in awe of him. They had driven up to Wimberley with a group of about 20 divers out of Pasadena and set up camp near the well. The two of them rolled in late, close to midnight, and decided they would get a dive in while everyone else was still setting up tents. The passage they wanted to hit had already killed at least 4 divers before them. To get through it, you had to take your tank off your back and push it into the crack ahead of you, then crawl in after it. It is a real technique. It is also a technique that commits you completely before you can see what is on the other side. Here is the detail that turns my stomach. This was not a planned expedition. There were no backup lights staged, no safety line run into that final passage, none of the meticulous preparation a dive that deep demands. It was 2 young men, late at night, deciding on impulse to go for the one room nobody had conquered. A third diver named Moy went in with them and trailed them to the squeeze. He watched them pull off their tanks and back into the crevice one at a time. He swung his light, trying to catch Brashear's eye as he slid in last. Brashear never looked up. Moy held there as long as his own air would let him, banging his knife against his tank, sending sharp metal rings into the water. Nothing came back. His gauge dropping, he left his light shining into the mouth of the passage like a lantern in a window and turned for the surface. And as he rose, the clear water behind him turned to a solid, churning brown. Something down there had let go. Moy broke the surface into the quiet Texas night. He already knew, but knowing it and getting them back were 2 very different things. And the man they were about to call would nearly die learning the difference. 10 minutes of air. The call went out to Don Dibble, dive shop owner near San Marcos, former Navy diver, and one of the most respected deepwater rescue men in the whole state. Dibble had answered calls from Jacob's well before. He knew, picking up the phone in the dark, roughly what a midnight call from that well meant for anybody still inside it. He came anyway, right away, with a team of trained volunteers behind him. When he got there, the survivors were sitting on the limestone bank, hollowed out, staring at the water. One of them had already made 2 90-minute dives back to back and swore he had seen the bodies buried under a pile of gravel. Dibble looked down into that black gap in the creek, a hole barely 15 feet wide, famous far out of proportion to its size. Every instinct told him to wait for daylight. The dead could wait. So they set up to bring the 2 of them home in the morning. Morning came. The divers went down with garden trowels, the little hand tools you use for delicate digging, and immediately hit the wall this well is infamous for. The passage was choked with loose gravel, and the gravel moved. Scoop out a handful, and more slid down to fill the gap. The whole pile was in slow, permanent collapse. Every attempt to clear it just made it worse. The reports coming up got grimmer, and Dibble made the call that tells you exactly what kind of man he was. He would not send anyone into a place he would not go himself. So he geared up, calm and methodical, ran his safety line from the surface, staged spare tanks along the route, and checked his gauge at the mouth of the passage. About 10 minutes of air. He signaled his safety diver and pushed his head and shoulders into the opening. 10 minutes. That was the entire margin he had given himself. The thin line between doing his job and never coming back up. He believed that was enough. The gravel let go. A wall of rock and silt poured down on top of him and buried him past the waist, pinning both arms. Visibility went to zero before he could even react. He could not move, could not bang his tank, could not signal the diver a few feet behind him that he was dying. His breathing spiked, and the air that promised 10 minutes started draining at a speed he could feel and could not stop. And right as he felt himself starting to fade out, his body did the last thing a body does, a violent full-frame convulsion, the deepest survival reflex the nervous system has. And it shook him loose, just enough. His safety divers saw it, lunged in, and jammed a spare regulator into the cloud. Dibble's hand found it. He breathed,